Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Light Lessons with Sierra. This is our 18th episode? I cannot believe it's been 18 episodes. I am so excited. This week, we are focusing on the light lesson, integrity. I don't know why I keep doing this to myself, where I task myself with introducing such extraordinary people in my life. And I have done it once again. I have to figure out how to articulate how important my guest this week is and has always been in my life. You met Rita Berglund for the episode around surrender. Well, her other half is Brad Berglund, and that is who is my guest this week. He is a spiritual director. He was my music minister when I was growing up. I've known him since I was 7 years old. He is one of the most inspirational and influential people. We have always, since I can remember, had extremely detailed conversations, and he's always been somebody that I can ask the hard questions of life to. And he doesn't answer them for me, but he talks in a way that gets me to think about things in new ways and expand the way that I might be looking at a situation. I am so honored that he took his time to be here with us, and that this is the person that is going to share his wisdom with all of you around the light lesson integrity. I cannot say enough amazing things about him, and I am, as always, so happy that you're here. Welcome to another episode of Light Lessons with Sierra, number 18, Integrity, featuring Brad Berglund.
Voila! Woo!
Yeah.
I have to wear these glasses because I'm going to look at some notes. Is that all right?
Brad, I expect nothing less from you.
Okay.
I have notes.
I want to have integrity in this conversation.
I want you to have integrity in this conversation. Now, Brad, oh, it's so good to see you.
You too.
All right, you ready?
I think so.
Oh, Brad!
We'll just act like we're just down at that bar having appetizers together.
That is it.
That's sort of how this all started anyway.
Actually, yes. Everybody, I'm just so excited because you all know Rita Berglund. You met Rita Berglund first in yonder episode, ye old episode of Light Lessons.
Way back.
Way back when. And now we get Brad Berglund. So once again, just am so grateful immediately that you're here. I just can't believe that we're getting to do this. We would have never imagined, I feel like, that we'd be having this conversation, these conversations today on YouTube, which didn't even exist when we met each other. You are somebody who I have always sought advice from, and you are such a role model to me, and one of my most favorite, inspirational, wonderful, also beautiful voice, everybody. You need to understand, this man, actually, you're the first person I took a private voice lesson from.
I think you were 15 or something.
I must have been. Yeah, 15 or 16 in the old church choir room.
Right. That's right. I saw all the potential, I might add. Yeah.
I'm so grateful that you're here, and I didn't really give you a choice of what light lesson, did I?
What kind of grew out of conversations we've had.
It did. Yeah. So welcome to Integrity, folks, with the man himself, Brad Berglund. I feel like when it started coming into my consciousness about how important words are, I actually credit to you. I remember you preaching things and always talking about the etymology of words. And when we had our first conversation about the word integrity, you explained to me what it actually means. So can you, usually I read the definition, I don't need to. It's like, there's no point. Don't.
Well, I do like the way you do that. I want to say first that how proud I am of you that you're doing this. And it seems to me that it's one of those unexpected gifts of COVID that you've had this vision because of Zoom and time at home and time to ponder that you might not have had, that you're gathering together people who are important to you and talking about meaningful things. And I'm really honored to be part of that. I feel like I'm in great company with all these people you've been interviewing. Very interesting people in your life.
Very interesting from all types of walks of life.
Yeah, for sure.
So will you give to us a definition of integrity?
Yeah, I've been, just pondering how many different ways we look at that word, and then I guess I'd like to focus in on one of those for today. But I have a few notes here as I do. I don't want to steal your dictionary thunder, but you often give the dictionary definitions. So I thought I'd just read that. Integrity is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, moral uprightness. For example, you might say they're known to be a person of integrity. We'd use the word that way. I certainly grew up with this sense of what the word means because I grew up in scouting. Way back I was a Cub Scout, and then I was a Weeblo, and then I was a Boy Scout. Didn't quite get to Eagle Scout, but I made it to life. And anyway, I learned early on the Scout law is a Scout is trustworthy, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent.
Wow.
No kidding. That's the Scout law. And I memorized that early on as a kid. And I was taught that that's what it meant to be a person of integrity, is to exhibit those things in your life.
Wow.
That's a pretty intense list when you think about it, isn't it?
It is. And also for a kid to have to figure out where.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. What that really meant. And my grandfather, who was very important to me, he lived in South Dakota and he was a trucker for specific small farms. And when we vacationed, I'd spend a lot of time with him and go with him, spend the whole day in his truck. And his name was Arthur. And I learned early on that meant man of integrity. So there's that word again that was kind of put in my psyche a long time ago. And then when I got out of graduate school and started the career, I became quite a devotee of the Franklin Planner system. And yeah, that was another interesting kind of brush up against this word integrity, because their whole concept was based on the idea that Benjamin Franklin wrote his 10 highest values of his life out on a little piece of paper. And he put it in his pocket and he carried it around every day. And he would look at it throughout the day just to make sure he was living out of his 10 highest values.
Whoa, I never knew this.
I know. It's very interesting, little historic trivia piece, but they built this whole planning system for personal planning based on that concept from Franklin. And then Stephen Covey, got involved, so it became Franklin Covey. What the guy said at the introductory workshop, learning how to use this system, and he handed out this sheet and asked us all to do that, just to take time to write down our 10 highest values in our personal life. What are the things we value the most in life? And then he taught us how to translate that list of 10 top values into our day, into our daily routine. What I remember that they said at the workshop was, when your inner values and your daily life come together, you have a credible claim on happiness.
That's so major.
Yeah. And you could kind of see how this could actually work for you in your daily life. And so that was another kind of personal experience I had with this whole idea of integrity, living out of your highest values. Mm-hmm. So that's one important way to look at it, I think, that there's a kind of moral compass that we each choose to live by. The rhythm of our daily life can actually reflect those values.
Yes.
Then we also use the word like the integrity of something, right? Yes. And I used it for our back steps, that your dad may have come over and helped me do those way back when. And at some point, I called the people who helped me put it in and said, hey, my steps have lost all their integrity, you know, and I'm afraid somebody's going to get hurt walking down the steps. So that's another way to use the word, isn't it?
I love it so much.
That this thing is falling apart.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's lost its integrity. Can you help?
Yeah, right, exactly. My life's falling apart. You could transfer it right into that.
Yes.
And I feel like I'm losing my integrity and I need help.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's that's another way to look at it. But then I remember also sort of pondering the etymology of the word and starting to look at other words that were related. And that's when I really discovered that the word integrity is related to integrate. And that both of those words come from the word integer, which is, as you know, a whole number, as opposed to a fraction. So it's about wholeness. You know, kind of fundamentally, integrity is about wholeness.
Yeah.
And not, instead of living a fractured life. And so what does that mean if we really start thinking about living life out of a deep sense of wholeness? You know, that takes us to another place.
Yeah.
And that then has these implications for all of us about how we integrate our lives.
Yes.
I often like to talk about just being human and the journey of being human with people, because Rita and I lead these pilgrimage experiences around the world, and we focus on the practices of pilgrimage as you travel. And so that can be translated easily into your whole life is a pilgrimage, really. And what does that look like then, to treat your whole life as pilgrimage or journey? And so throughout our lives, or this journey of life we're on, this human experience that we're living, this word human is related to the word humus, which of course means fertile soil. It's something a lot of us have done this summer with the pandemic, is we've stayed home and we've put our hands in the dirt, right? And we've grown things. I mean, your mother is one of those people who loves to put her hands in the dirt and make things grow. So when you think about what it takes to do that, just from the soil point of view of the soil, it has to be really fertile and open and receptive, right?
Yes.
It has to be full of nutrients. So if you think about the word human coming from that word and that image, then I like to think of that as our life's experiences become the things that drop in to that soil. And what do we do with that? How do we help the lessons of those life experiences? How do we let those things take root in us and become part of us and teach us something? So I was thinking about that as I thought about this idea of integrity as wholeness. Mm-hmm. And then I found this wonderful quotation. I don't know if you know Parker Palmer, but he's one of my favorite writers in terms of education and the spiritual life. He's a Quaker. He's just one of our wise people in this country, Parker Palmer. And he has a book that's called Let Your Life Speak. It's a beautiful book about just being on the human journey. And he says this, he says, by choosing integrity, I become more whole. But wholeness does not mean perfection. It means becoming more real by acknowledging the whole of who I am. And then he says, our deepest calling is to grow into our own authentic selfhood, whether or not it conforms to some image of who we ought to be. As we do so, we will not only find the joy that every human being seeks, we will also find our path of authentic service in the world. Quotes from Parker are about integrity, but I think that's sort of what I'm getting at. How do we put together the fractured part of ourselves throughout our life's journey into this sense of wholeness by taking those lessons that we're all learning through our lives' experiences and integrate those?
Yeah, all of the words that you're giving to it and that he gave to it, it feels like integrity is more active than we realize, as opposed to it's just something we have. It feels like it should be active, especially when you remind us that it comes from integrate. That, so how can we activate that, and creating the wholeness and remembering that we are whole beings, and it's our birthright to be whole beings, right?
Yeah. 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 Maybe we can come up with a word from integrity that's like a verb.
To integrity. So is integrity the journey, as opposed to in this world that we're living in now where we're doing a lot of outside in?
You could use the analogy of the wood. It fell apart and it lost its integrity. So integrity comes from the inner core, that essential place in us where we find our wholeness.
So everything that you're saying it makes sense. It's like, oh, I want to be on that train. I want to be a whole person, not a fraction.
Yeah.
But is integrity separate? Like for each of us, is there an integrity code like there is a moral code? Or is integrity more of a universal thing that we're supposed to understand? Or is it individual?
I think you're right on both of those. From my perspective, I would say that there's individual and personal integrity that we're sort of talking about, but there's also communal integrity, like societal integrity. And I think we're struggling with that probably right now as a country, having integrity as a society, trying to figure out what that looks like.
Yes.
How the mosaic we are as a country, this beautiful mosaic, how that can have integrity rather than being fractured into little pieces.
Yeah.
According to, all different kinds of criteria, we're fracturing. And how can we have integrity as a society? That's probably another topic unto itself. But I think it's really important to remember that we each have personal integrity, but then we come together in community, and then we work together on community integrity.
How do we get there? Where do we start?
So, I was a classical guitar major in college, and I studied in Kansas City at the Conservatory of Music. And for the first time really in my sort of musical experience, my teacher there, a wonderful teacher, Doug Neat, I think for the first time I really learned how to practice. So he taught me, you don't get to just sit down and play songs and sing. The practice is something else. And it's about sort of taking these pieces and working them slowly through in different ways. But his point was, what I learned growing up, that practice makes perfect, actually wasn't true. He said, let me show you, practice makes permanent. And what he said was, what you practice is what you become. And I, of course, pondered that a lot in terms of the spiritual life. What does that look like then for all of us on this human journey? If practice makes permanent, if what we do is what we become, and the way we do it is the person we become, then it's very important to be attentive to what it is we're practicing in life. I have a friend who has struggled for years with kind of balance was his issue, because he's a very busy person. So how can I find balance? Is sort of his question all the time. And he realized at some point, with the help of his spiritual director, he realized that probably what he needed to focus on was balancing. And it's just a constant practice. So rather than finding balance, like one day waking up and going, oh, I'm balanced, finally, he realized that it's just a lifelong practice of balancing. And I think probably that's what we're talking about together, that what we practice is who we become. And so we want to be people of integrity, living out of our wholeness. So how do we practice that?
Yeah.
And it's by doing it every day, taking the fractured pieces of who we are and bringing them together in wholeness. That requires reflection, doesn't it? Personal reflection, help along the journey.
Yeah.
Finding a good therapist or a good spiritual director or a mentor who really listens to our deep desires and needs and longings.
That also speaks to the piece about asking for help. So when we come out of what we know to be, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't go with my integrity, which is something we can feel, that we reach out to trusted people.
Right.
Do you think it is helpful for us to reach out when we need help?
Oh, I do. I do. And to find the people who can genuinely help you. And our friends have a lot to do with that too. You know, Rita grew up, as you know, on the Western Slope, my wife, and she was in a fruit farming family. So she knows a lot about how things grow and, you know, back to this idea of humus, but she talks about it's those nutrients that actually become the fruit in our lives. I mean, they actually become the fruit. So our fruit, the fruit of our life is all filled with all these nutrients that are in here. And I would say our friends are like the fertilizer of our life, you know, and it's very important to have friends that want us to grow and want us to produce fruit and have the very best possible motive in mind for us and desire for us to be whole. So yeah, surrounding ourselves with good friends and also choosing the right mentors, I think is critical for all of us at any age. I guess using this analogy of the mosaic, thinking of our life as a beautiful mosaic, but also as our society as a mosaic of different cultures and different skin colors and different backgrounds and different ways of being in the world. This mosaic of who we are as a country, thinking about that too. Also individual personal integrity as a mosaic that's coming together. I tell you the most beautiful example of that. We were with our friends out in Oregon. We snuck out there to visit them in August, our really good friends out there who live up the McKenzie River from Eugene. And we left on Friday. They were evacuated on Monday, and they lost everything on Wednesday to the fire. Everything. And they were developing this retreat center in their home, and they have an Airbnb. And so they've been up there sifting through. I have a lot of grief for them, with them. And they've been sifting through their lives and kind of coming to terms a little bit with what this means for them, that this has happened. And one of the beautiful things that they've done is they've collected, through the sifting on their property, they've collected pieces of burned colored glass, and they've put it all in a big basket. They're thinking about putting that together in a mosaic, finding someone who does that kind of work and putting these kind of fractured pieces that represent what they've lost. And I just think that's a beautiful image of what we could all sort of practice in life, is to constantly reflect on what it would take for each of us to become whole and to live out of that integrity and that wholeness.
Yeah.
What would the colors of that be for each of us? What would that mosaic look like?
When we're trying to piece ourselves back together or life back together, there is no earthly timeline for when that, right?
Well, there's probably nothing instant about it, is there? It's just our work to do, yeah.
Yeah, it's just our work to do.
But sharing the journey is so important, which is certainly what you're doing with these light lessons, talking to people about meaningful things and encouraging them to share the journey with those who listen.
I mean, this is, I guess, a type of mosaic. At the end, there's going to be 20 pieces of this so that people aren't doing this alone, that it is a shared experience. That's really important at this time that we're in right now.
Oh, it is. So important. It's really easy, isn't it, to become isolated during this pandemic experience?
Yes.
Yeah.
And like you were talking about, what you practice is what you become. Practice makes permanent. So hopefully if you were living a certain way when there wasn't a pandemic, then you get to reevaluate and decide about these nutrients. Mm-hmm. And how am I going to grow when this is done? Right. What will I look like? Yeah,
right. And friends as fertilizer.
And friends as fertilizer. I love it. Friends as fertilizer. Yeah. You are my fertilizer, Brad. Thank you for fertilizing.
No, it's true. I mean, friends help us grow into our wholeness if they love us.
Yes.
We love them. And we genuinely share the journey of life together.
There's this idea, I feel like, and we hear a lot, where we're told to check in with your own integrity. Things like, You don't do that if that goes against your integrity. You say no if that goes against your integrity. For people who have a hard time understanding what does that mean of how do I check in, can you articulate ways that we can check in with what that actually means for us?
Yeah, to kind of check into the fragmented parts of us
Yes.
that we're having a hard time integrating.
Yes.
I do. I think, just the practicing living a more reflective life, being attentive to things that have meaning in our lives. One of the things we do as we travel is we spend time doing those kinds of things. Lots of reflection on what we just did. Some ways of travel, like educational trips, might focus more on meeting in the evening to think about tomorrow. We tend to spend time reflecting on the experience we've just had. It's more of that pilgrimage style of travel. It focuses on being reflective in the travel experience and integrating the experience that you've just had sort of in some way.
Yes.
So it's a very intentional thing, isn't it? That kind of reflection.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we just don't make time for that. But there are certainly many ways to make time for that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the practices of pilgrimage is crossing thresholds with great intention. So it slows everything down. So we come to an opening to a 5,000-year-old ritual site, or to a cathedral, or an opening in a fence, going out to see something, to walk across this pasture and have this experience. Well, we stop at that threshold and we just spend a moment of reflection, because maybe you need to let go of something before you step through there. Maybe you need to think about what you'd like to take with you intentionally as you step across that threshold. It's kind of what we call in the Irish tradition a thin place, where the future and the past come together there. Your outer world and your inner world come together in this place. Heaven and earth, the eternal world and the invisible world, come together in a meaningful way. So if you take time there at that threshold to reflect on what you're about to do, it just slows everything down and creates meaning in the experience. And we can take those practices into our lives and just slow it down.
Yeah.
So that then we realize what the fractured pieces are, and then get the help we need to integrate those pieces into our lives. Or regrets that we live with, all those kinds of things, pain that we live with in our life. I was thinking of your title, Light Lessons, and I know the focus is on being light and spreading light and illuminating the dark places in the world, which is beautiful. I was also thinking, I wonder if the word, because in English, it's spelled the same, light, and light meaning illumination, but light also the opposite of heavy.
Yes.
Well, there's this wonderful mythology in Egypt, for example. When a person dies, they say that your heart is weighed on a scale next to a feather. And so those whose hearts are as light as a feather are allowed into the afterlife. This is the mythology. And what they mean by that is a person who doesn't have the heaviness of regret and the heaviness of these life experiences that are unintegrated. It creates this heaviness. It's a wonderful kind of image to think about your heart being weighed against a feather. Totally. And living with a kind of lighthearted, in the best possible way to say that, living with a lighthearted sense of buoyancy in your life.
Yeah. It isn't just being flippant then about the deep sorrows and the deep sadness. It's that integrate so that we're not living in regret of we have grieved through and with and.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes we make mountains out of molehills, right? But it's also very important not to make molehills out of mountains in our lives, to take these things seriously. Yeah.
Ooh, Brad. Yes, Brad. We got so much good stuff.
You're pretty easy to talk to, I have to say. You ask such good questions.
Oh, good.
I wish everyone I talk to all day long would have your enthusiasm and be as interested as you are.
So in conclusion, will you please, Rita, of course, deemed the Marination Station the cosmic spa in her episode around surrender. So in honor,
that was a wonderful image.
yeah, of course she came up with it. So for our cosmic spa, for our Marination Station, what would you like to leave us with of what we can marinate in, spa day in, around integrity, Brad?
I'm going to, I think, offer a quotation from Howard Thurman, amazing writer on the spiritual life. And he was actually the spiritual counselor for Martin Luther King Jr. and wrote some beautiful books that I recommend. I think you'd find it very helpful. Howard Thurman says this: don't ask yourself what the world needs. That's kind of stunning just in itself. Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and then go do that. Because what the world needs is people who've come alive. Yeah.
Like, what do you even say?
That's what I thought the first time I read that. Yeah.
That is everything. That's everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we have a task to find what makes us come alive.
Right.
So,
Just spend time with that question. What is it that really makes me come alive?
thank you so much, Brad, for taking your time to talk to us about integrity and all of the facets of it and all the wisdom that you gave to us. You are just one of my favorite humans on the planet. I love you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being you.
See ya either in New York, either in Colorado, or on a pilgrimage.
Oh, great. I hope that's sooner rather than later.
Me too.
Let's all hold out hope for 2021.
Come on.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Brad.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm with you on the journey.
You sure are. And I'm with you.
Peace.
We are integrated.
Yes, we are.